The sterile examination room felt suffocating as Amelia Hayes worked alone under the unforgiving glare of overhead lights. A German shepherd sprawled motionless on the metal table, his chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular gasps that made her stomach clench with worry. Dark stains had already soaked through the emergency bandaging she'd hastily applied, and despite her best efforts, the bleeding showed no signs of stopping. "Easy, boy," she whispered, her voice soft despite the anxiety clawing at her chest. "We're going to get you through this." The dog's eyes, clouded with pain, fixed on her face with the kind of trust that made her heart ache. She'd always had this effect on animals. They seemed to sense something in her that even she didn't understand. Dr. Maxwell called it a gift, but right now it felt more like a burden as she watched the shepherd struggle for each breath. At 24, Amelia had seen her share of emergency cases during her 2 years at Riverside Veterinary Clinic while pursuing her veterinary studies. But tonight felt different. The German shepherd had been brought in by a frantic owner just after closing time, hit by a car that hadn't bothered to stop. The impact had left deep gashes across his side and what she suspected was internal bleeding. Without proper surgical equipment and Dr. Maxwell's expertise, she was fighting a losing battle. The clinic was eerily quiet at 11:30 at night. Dr. Maxwell had left 3 hours earlier, muttering something about his grandson's birthday party, leaving Amelia alone with the emergency cases. She didn't mind. Usually the solitude gave her space to think, to focus on healing without the pressure of watching eyes. But tonight every shadow seemed to hold secrets, and every sound made her jump. Amelia's fingers found the dog's pulse point, counting the rapid, thready beats, while her mind raced through treatment options she wasn't qualified to attempt. Her small apartment above the laundromat barely qualified as housing, but it was all she could afford on her salary and student loans. Her life had been a series of temporary homes, foster families, who saw her as a burden or a paycheck after her parents died in what she'd been told was a car accident when she was 16. Her phone lay dead on the counter, its black screen reflecting her worried expression. She'd been so focused on the injured dog that she'd forgotten to charge it, and now the battery had died completely. The landline sat on Dr. Maxwell's desk across the room, and she needed to move quickly. The dog's breathing was becoming more shallow, and she could see his gums growing pale, a clear sign of shock setting in. Crossing to the office, Amelia noticed a file folder that had fallen from Dr. Maxwell's desk, papers spilling across the floor. As she knelt to gather them, a particular document caught her eye, a research paper with an unusual heading: Hereditary Healing Abilities in Human Bloodlines, Documented Cases and Theories. Odd. Dr. Maxwell was a traditional veterinarian. He'd never mentioned interest in alternative healing methods, let alone anything that sounded this esoteric. The paper contained diagrams of human hands with glowing energy patterns and references to ancient lineages of people who could heal with touch. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note and phone number: emergency contact, last resort only. The German shepherd whimpered, pulling Amelia back to the urgent situation. She quickly stacked the papers, but not before noting the phone number. In her desperation, with the tea fading before her eyes, she reached for the landline and dialed what she thought was Dr. Maxwell's emergency contact. Her fingers, slick with a nervous sweat, fumbled across the keys in the dim light. The overhead bulb had burned out an hour ago, leaving only the examination light to work by. She'd been meaning to replace it, but there never seemed to be enough time for maintenance when animals were dying. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Amelia tapped her foot impatiently, glancing back at the German shepherd. His eyes were starting to glaze over, and panic shot through her like ice water. She'd lost patience before it was an inevitable part of veterinary medicine, but never because she couldn't reach help in time. Finally, someone answered. "Hello." The voice was wrong, too deep, too commanding. Definitely not Dr. Maxwell's familiar rasp, but desperation made her push forward. She couldn't hang up and waste precious time dialing again. "Dr. Maxwell, thank God," she breathed into the phone. "The German shepherd is getting worse. I need you here now. The bleeding won't stop, and he's going into shock. I've done everything I can, but it's not enough. His breathing is shallow, his temperature is dropping, and I think there might be internal damage. Please, I need your help." Silence stretched across the line, heavy and strange. Amelia could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could smell the antiseptic that never quite masked the underlying sense of fear and pain that clung to every veterinary clinic. The silence felt wrong, charged with something she couldn't identify. Where are you? The voice was crisp, authoritative. Definitely not Dr. Maxwell. Amelia's blood turned cold. She had dialed wrong. In her panic and exhaustion, she'd mixed up the numbers. Heat flooded her cheeks as embarrassment warred with desperation. This was exactly the kind of mistake she couldn't afford to make. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I must have dialed the wrong number. I thought you were someone else. I was trying to reach my mentor about a medical emergency." The location, the voice repeated, and something in its tone made her spine straighten. It wasn't a request. It was a command delivered with the kind of authority that expected immediate compliance. Amelia glanced around the empty clinic, suddenly aware of how isolated she was. The parking lot outside was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows between the buildings. Her beat-up Honda sat alone under the flickering security light, and beyond that nothing but darkness stretching toward the industrial district. Anyone could be out there watching, waiting. "I can't tell you that," she said, trying to inject strength into her voice. "I don't know who you are. This was a mistake. You said the German Shepherd was dying." The stranger's voice was calm now, almost gentle, but underneath the softness was steel. "You need help." Amelia looked back at the Dane whose breathing had become even more labored. His tongue was hanging out, pink foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. She was losing him, and Dr. Maxwell still wasn't answering his phone. She tried his number 3 times in the last hour, getting only voicemail each time. Her hands clenched around the receiver as she faced an impossible choice. There was something in the stranger's voice, a certainty that suggested he knew exactly what kind of help she needed. Maybe he was a veterinarian too, someone who understood the desperation of watching a life slip away. Maybe the universe had connected her to exactly the person who could save this dog's life. "Riverside Veterinary Clinic," she heard herself say, "on Maple Street just past the old courthouse. But I should warn you, I'm calling the police if you're not who you say you are." The line went dead. Amelia stared at the phone in her hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she just done? She'd given her location to a complete stranger. Someone who'd answered a wrong number and somehow convinced her to trust him with information that could put her in serious danger. But the German Shepherd's labored breathing reminded her why she'd taken the risk. She moved back to the examination table, placing her hands gently on the dog's side. His breathing was shallow, rapid, his body temperature dropping despite the warming blanket she'd wrapped around him. She had maybe 20 minutes before she lost him completely. Outside, she heard the sound of engines. Not just one car, but several, their headlights cutting through the darkness as they pulled into the clinic's parking lot. Amelia's mouth went dry as she watched through the window. 3 black SUVs arranged themselves in the parking lot like pieces on a chessboard, their tinted windows revealing nothing about the occupants. This wasn't Dr. Maxwell. This was something else entirely. The engines shut off in perfect synchronization, and Amelia watched as figures emerged from the vehicles. Even in the dim lighting, she could see they moved with predatory grace, their posture alert and ready. These weren't veterinarians coming to help with an emergency. These were something far more dangerous. Amelia's hands found the German Shepherd's head, stroking his ears as she whispered reassurances she didn't feel. Whatever was about to happen, she wouldn't abandon the animal that had trusted her with his life. The clinic door's bell chimed as someone entered. The man who entered the clinic moved with the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. Amelia's breath caught as she took in his imposing figure, easily 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his dark jacket perfectly. His black hair was cropped short, professional, but there was nothing soft about the sharp angles of his face or the unusual amber eyes that swept the clinic with a predatory assessment. Behind him came 4 other men, each one radiating the same controlled danger. They weren't thugs or common criminals. Their expensive clothes and coordinated movements suggested something far more sophisticated. Amelia's grip tightened on the examination table as they fanned out through the small space, their eyes cataloging exits and potential threats with military precision. "You're not Dr. Maxwell," Amelia said, proud that her voice remained steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. The leader's gaze found hers, and she felt pinned like a butterfly under glass. "No," he agreed, his voice, the same deep baritone that had commanded her location over the phone. "I'm someone who received your message about an emergency." "What kind of veterinarians travel in a convoy?" Amelia demanded, positioning herself protectively between the strangers and the injured German Shepherd. "Who are you people?" Instead of answering, the man approached the examination table with the careful steps, his attention shifting to the dying dog. Something in his expression softened as he took in the animal's condition, the shallow breathing, the blood-soaked bandages, the glassy eyes that spoke of approaching death. "What happened to him?" he asked, and Amelia was surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. "Hit and run," she replied automatically, then caught herself. "Not that it's any of your business. I asked you a question." The man's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "My name is Gabriel Stone. I run a specialized veterinary practice. When I received your call, I thought one of my patients was in danger." "Specialized how?" Amelia's eyes narrowed. "And why do you need bodyguards for house calls?" "I work with difficult cases," Gabriel said smoothly. "Animals that others have given up on. As for security, you'd be surprised how emotional people get when their pets are involved." It was a reasonable explanation, but something in his tone suggested layers of meaning she wasn't privy to. Amelia studied his face, looking for tells for signs of deception. Her father had been a surgeon before he died, and she'd learned to read people's lies in the subtle tightening around their eyes, the way their shoulders tensed when they fabricated stories. Gabriel Stone was hiding something, but she couldn't detect outright deception, more like he was telling a version of the truth edited for her consumption. "The dog is dying," she said bluntly. "If you're really a veterinarian, prove it." Without hesitation, Gabriel rolled up his sleeves and moved to the sink, washing his hands with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it thousands of times. Amelia watched as he examined the German Shepherd with gentle but thorough hands, his fingers finding pressure points. She'd missed his eyes identifying symptoms she'd overlooked. "Collapsed lung," he murmured more to himself than to her. "Probably from the impact. That's why the breathing is so labored." Amelia's heart sank. "I don't have the equipment for thoracic surgery. He's going to die, isn't he?" "Not if we work fast." Gabriel's hands moved with surprising gentleness as he stroked the dog's head. "I need you to hold him steady. Can you do that?" "Of course, but—" "Trust me," Gabriel interrupted, and something in his eyes made her believe him, despite every rational instinct screaming warnings. What followed was the most intense 20 minutes of Amelia's life. Gabriel worked with instruments from a medical kit. One of his men produced his hands steady and sure as he performed emergency procedures that would have challenged a board-certified veterinary surgeon. Amelia found herself assisting almost automatically, her body responding to his quiet commands before her mind could process them. "Pressure here," he directed, guiding her hands to the correct position. "Feel that the lung is re-expanding." The moment their fingers touched, Amelia felt something like an electric shock race up her arm. A warm, golden light emanated briefly from where their skin made contact, startling them both. Gabriel's hands stilled for just a heartbeat, his eyes flicking to hers with an expression of profound surprise. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something that had nothing to do with the medical emergency. But what was most shocking was the immediate response in the dog. The area their joined hands touched began to heal visibly, the damaged tissue knitting together at an impossible rate. "Focus," Gabriel said quietly, but his voice had roughened slightly. Amelia nodded, trying to ignore the way her pulse had quickened. This wasn't the time for whatever strange phenomenon was crackling between them. The German Shepherd's life hung in the balance, and yet, somehow she knew the dog would live now. The certainty filled her, unexplainable but absolute. Under Gabriel's guidance, they stabilized the dog's breathing and stopped the internal bleeding. Amelia watched in amazement as the animal's color improved, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. It was like watching a miracle unfold. "How did you know," she asked as they cleaned up, "about the collapsed lung? I've been studying veterinary medicine for 3 years and I missed it completely." "Experience," Gabriel replied, but there was something evasive in his tone. "I've seen similar injuries before in dogs." His pause was almost imperceptible. "Among other animals." Amelia sensed there was more to that story, but the German Shepherd chose that moment to lift his head and look at her with clear, alert eyes. The improvement was dramatic, almost supernaturally fast. "He's going to be fine," Gabriel said, stroking the dog's ears. "Full recovery probably within a week." "A week?" Amelia stared at him. "Injuries like this usually take months to heal completely." "Some animals are stronger than others," Gabriel said, and again she felt like he was speaking in code. As if summoned by some invisible signal, Gabriel's men began moving toward the door. The leader himself stepped back from the examination table, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Wait," Amelia called out. "I need to know how to reach you for follow-up care or if there are complications." Gabriel pulled a business card from his jacket and placed it on the counter. Amelia glanced at it, expensive paper embossed lettering, but containing only a name and phone number. No business address, no credentials, no indication of what kind of practice he ran. "If you need anything," he said, "call that number." "What about payment?" Amelia asked. "You just saved this dog's life. I have to owe you something." "Consider it a professional courtesy," Gabriel replied, but his eyes lingered on her face with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Though I would suggest being more careful about walking alone at night. This isn't the safest neighborhood." "I've been working here for 2 years," Amelia said defensively. "I know how to take care of myself." "I'm sure you do." Gabriel's smile was enigmatic, but some dangers are harder to spot than others. Before Amelia could ask what he meant, he was moving toward the door with that same predatory grace. His men fell into formation around him, and within moments the clinic was empty, except for Amelia and the recovering German shepherd. Amelia stood in the sudden silence, trying to process what had just happened. A stranger had answered her wrong number, brought a team of men who moved like soldiers, performed veterinary surgery with techniques she'd never seen, and then disappeared into the night like something out of a dream. She picked up his business card, running her thumb over the raised lettering. Gabriel Stone. The name felt familiar on her tongue, though she was certain they'd never met before. There was something about him that called to her, something that made her want to trust him, despite every red flag her logical mind was raising. The German shepherd whined softly, drawing her attention back to the present. His eyes were bright and alert, his breathing normal. By all rights, he should still be fighting for his life, but instead, he looked ready to jump off the table and run around the parking lot. Amelia's phone buzzed with a text message. She'd plugged it in while Gabriel worked, and now it showed several missed calls from Dr. Maxwell. "Sorry, kiddo," his voicemail said. "Family emergency ran longer than expected. How's our four-legged patient?" Amelia stared at her phone, then at the business card, then at the miraculously recovered dog. How was she supposed to explain any of this to Dr. Maxwell? How could she tell him that a mysterious stranger with no credentials had performed emergency surgery in their clinic and then vanished without a trace? Outside, she heard a car engine starting. Amelia rushed to the window just in time to see a single black sedan pulling away from the curb across the street. Had someone been watching the clinic? Watching her, Gabriel's words echoed in her mind. Some dangers are harder to spot than others. 3 days passed since the mysterious encounter at the clinic, and Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that her world had tilted off its axis. The German shepherd, whom she'd started calling Max, had made a complete recovery that defied every principle of veterinary science she'd learned. Dr. Maxwell had been stunned by the animal's progress, running additional tests that showed no trace of the severe injuries that had nearly killed him. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Maxwell muttered, studying Max's latest x-rays. "It's as if the trauma never happened. The lung tissue shows no scarring, no signs of recent repair. Are you absolutely certain about the initial diagnosis?" Amelia nodded, though doubt crept into her voice. "He was dying, Dr. Maxwell. Collapsed lung, internal bleeding, shock symptoms. I documented everything." But when she'd searched for her notes from that night, they were nowhere to be found. The examination form she'd filled out had vanished along with any physical evidence of Max's original condition. It was as if someone had deliberately erased all proof of what had happened. More disturbing than the missing paperwork was what Amelia had begun noticing around town. Cars that appeared wherever she went, different vehicles, but always with tinted windows that prevented her from seeing the occupants. A man in a coffee shop who left immediately after she arrived. The sensation of being watched that prickled along her spine every time she walked to her car. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia, a side effect of the stress from that night. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger each day. Someone was definitely keeping tabs on her movements. Amelia had tried researching Gabriel Stone online, but found only sparse information, a few business listings for Stone Industries, a successful consulting firm with offices in 3 major cities, some charity photos showing him at fundraising events, always impeccably dressed and surrounded by society's elite. Nothing that explained his veterinary skills or his small army of bodyguards. The business card he'd left contained only his name and a phone number. She'd picked it up a dozen times, thumb hovering over her phone's keypad, but something always stopped her from calling. What would she say? Thank you for saving a dog's life with impossible healing techniques. Please explain why I feel like I'm being followed. Thursday evening found Amelia leaving campus later than usual, her head buzzing with information from her advanced animal physiology lecture. Professor Martinez had covered regenerative healing in various species, touching on cases where animals recovered from injuries that should have been fatal. The parallels to Max's recovery were unsettling. The university parking lot was nearly empty, most students having fled for weekend plans or part-time jobs. Amelia's Honda sat under a flickering light that cast intermittent shadows across the asphalt. She'd parked in the same spot for 3 years without incident, but tonight something felt wrong. Two men emerged from behind a van parked 3 spaces away. They moved with purpose, their attention focused entirely on her. Amelia's hand tightened around her keys muscle memory from a self-defense class, making her position the longest key between her knuckles. Amelia Hayes, the taller man, asked, his smile too wide and too practiced. Who's asking? She replied, taking a step back toward the better-lit area near the science building. We're investigators, the second man said, pulling out a wallet that he flashed too quickly for her to read. We need to ask you some questions about the incident at your workplace 3 nights ago. What incident? Amelia's heart rate spiked, but she kept her voice level. Nothing happened at the clinic. Come now, Miss Hayes, the first man said, moving to block her retreat. We know about your visitors, the men with the expensive cars. What do they want with you? Amelia's mind raced. These men weren't police. Their suits were too cheap, their badges too conveniently brief, but they knew about Gabriel and his team, which meant they'd been watching that night. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, continuing to back away. And I don't have to answer your questions without proper identification. The men exchanged glances, and Amelia saw the moment they decided to drop the pretense. The taller one reached into his jacket while his partner moved to flank her. I think you do know, he said, his voice losing its false friendliness. And I think you're going to tell us everything. Amelia turned and ran. Behind her, she heard cursing and heavy footsteps. The science building was 50 yards away, but its doors would be locked after 8 in the evening. Her car was closer, but she'd never get the door open, and the engine started before they caught her. Panic flooded her system as she realized how isolated she was. Then she heard something that froze her blood, a low rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The footsteps behind her stopped abruptly. Amelia spun around to see her pursuer backing away from the shadows between 2 cars, their faces pale with terror. The growling intensified and massive shapes emerged from the darkness. Wolves, 3 of them, each larger than any wild animal should be. Their fur was so dark it seemed to absorb light, and their eyes glowed with an intelligence that was disturbingly human. They moved with coordinated precision, placing themselves between Amelia and the 2 men. What the hell? One of the men whispered, his hands shaking as he reached for something inside his jacket. The largest wolf's lips pulled back to reveal fangs that gleamed like ivory daggers. The sound it made was nothing like the howls Amelia had heard in nature documentaries. This was a promise of violence, a warning that transcended species. Both men turned and fled, stumbling over each other in their haste to reach their van. The engine roared to life and they peeled out of the parking lot with screeching tires, leaving Amelia alone with 3 enormous predators. Amelia should have been terrified. Every instinct should have been screaming at her to run, to find shelter, to call for help. Instead, she found herself studying the largest wolf's eyes. They were amber, almost gold, and achingly familiar. Gabriel, she whispered. The wolf's ears pricked forward, and something like surprise flickered across its features. For a moment, the 3 animals stood perfectly still, as if her recognition had changed some fundamental equation. Then the shadows between the cars shimmered, and where wolves had stood, 3 men had now waited. Amelia's mind struggled to process what she'd just witnessed, logic warring with the evidence of her own eyes. Gabriel stepped into the light fully human, but somehow retaining that same predatory grace. His clothes were dark and expensive, without a wrinkle to suggest he'd just transformed from another form entirely. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice carrying the same authority she remembered from the clinic. You're not human. Amelia's voice faltered as she tried to form words around the impossibility of what she'd just seen. No, Gabriel agreed simply. I'm not. And the casual admission hit her like a physical blow. Everything she thought she knew about the world had just been turned upside down. Shapeshifters were real. The man who'd saved Max's life was something out of legends and horror movies. "What are you?" she managed to ask. "We call ourselves shifters," Gabriel said, moving closer with careful steps as if approaching a skittish animal. "We share this world with humans, but we prefer to remain unnoticed." "Those men," Amelia said, glancing toward where the van had disappeared, "they knew about you. They were asking about that night at the clinic." Gabriel's expression darkened. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I didn't know what they were talking about." Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild evening. "How did they know? How did they find me?" "Because you were seen with me," Gabriel said, and something like guilt colored his voice. "Being associated with my kind puts you in danger from people who would use that knowledge for their own purposes." "What kind of purposes?" Instead of answering directly, Gabriel pulled out his phone and spoke in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. Amelia caught fragments: compromised, immediate extraction, and double the perimeter. That made her stomach clench with new fear. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, ending the call. "Safe from what?" Amelia demanded. "I don't understand any of this. 3 days ago, you saved a dog's life. Now you're telling me you're some kind of werewolf and people are hunting me because I witnessed it." "It's more complicated than that," Gabriel said carefully. "But yes, essentially, there are factions among humans who know about our existence. Some want to study us, others want to control us, and a few want to eliminate us entirely. Being seen with me has put you on their radar." Amelia laughed, a sharp sound edged with hysteria. "This is insane. I'm a veterinary student. I study for exams and worry about paying rent. I don't deal with secret organizations and shapeshifters." "You do now," Gabriel said gently. "I'm sorry, Amelia. If I'd known that call would endanger you, I would have found another way to help that night." "Found another way to help," you answered, "a wrong number." "No," Gabriel said, his eyes finding hers. "I answered exactly the call I was meant to answer." Before Amelia could ask what he meant, the distant sound of engines echoed across the parking lot. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. "Friends of yours?" she asked. Gabriel's expression was grim as he counted the lights. "No, and we're out of time." The attack came with brutal efficiency. Black SUVs roared into the parking lot from 3 directions, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Men poured out of those vehicles before they'd fully stopped moving with military precision that made Amelia's blood turn to ice. "Down!" Gabriel barked, his hand finding the small of her back and pushing her behind a concrete pillar. Amelia crouched in the shadows, her heart hammering, as she watched Gabriel and his 2 companions shift into their wolf forms with fluid grace. The transformation was mesmerizing and terrifying. Bones stretching, muscles rippling, human features melting into something wild and powerful. Within seconds, 3 enormous wolves stood where men had been moments before. The battle was unlike anything Amelia had ever imagined. The wolves moved like liquid darkness, striking from multiple angles with coordinated attacks that spoke of years of fighting together. But their opponents were prepared for supernatural adversaries wielding weapons that crackled with electricity and fired silver-tipped projectiles. "Tranquilizers," she heard one of the attackers shout. "We need them alive." The largest wolf, Gabriel, leaped over a car and tackled 2 men simultaneously, his massive form moving with impossible speed. But even as he fought, Amelia could see that they were outnumbered. More vehicles were arriving, disgorging fresh reinforcements. A tranquilizer dart caught one of Gabriel's companions in the shoulder. The wolf stumbled, his movements becoming sluggish as the drugs took effect. Gabriel's anguished howl echoed across the parking lot as he tried to reach his fallen pack member. Amelia couldn't just hide and watch. These creatures, these men were fighting to protect her, and one of them was about to be captured because of it. Without thinking, she grabbed her car keys and sprinted toward her Honda. "Amelia, no!" Gabriel's voice carried, even in his wolf form, a psychic projection that hit her mind with startling clarity. But she was already behind the wheel, engine roaring to life. Amelia had grown up in foster care, moving between families who saw her as a burden or a paycheck. She'd learned to drive at 13, stealing her foster father's truck to escape his wandering hands. Racing through back roads to avoid the police had taught her skills she'd never expected to need again. She floored the accelerator, her Honda shooting toward the attackers' vehicles like a missile. The element of surprise bought her precious seconds as the men dove for cover. Amelia spun the wheel hard right, her car sliding sideways and clipping two of the SUVs hard enough to crumple their front ends. The distraction gave Gabriel the opening he needed. He bounded toward his injured companion, grabbing the tranquilized wolf by the scruff and dragging him toward the shadows. The third member of their group provided cover, his snarls and snapping teeth keeping the attackers at bay. This way. Gabriel had shifted back to human form, his voice urgent as he beckoned Amelia from behind the science building. Amelia abandoned her ruined car and ran towards him, adrenaline making her movements sharp and precise. Behind her, shouts erupted as their attackers reorganized, but Gabriel was already leading her into the wooded area behind the campus. They ran through the darkness for what felt like hours, following paths that Amelia hadn't known existed. Gabriel moved with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and stone, while his companions flanked them in their wolf forms, ears constantly swiveling to catch sounds of pursuit. When they finally stopped, Amelia's lungs burned and her legs shook with exhaustion. They stood in a clearing where a sleek black helicopter waited, its rotors already spinning. The pilot looked like another of Gabriel's people, alert, professional, deadly. "Where are we going?" Amelia shouted over the noise of the engines. "Somewhere safe," Gabriel replied, helping her into the aircraft. "Somewhere they can't reach you." The helicopter lifted into the night sky, carrying Amelia away from everything familiar. Below, the lights of the city grew smaller until they were just scattered stars against the darkness. She pressed her face to the window, watching her old life disappear into the distance. Gabriel sat across from her, his expression grim as he spoke into a radio headset. Even without hearing the conversation, Amelia could tell it was bad news. His jaw tightened with each exchange, and his knuckles went white where he gripped the armrest. After 40 minutes of flight, they descended toward a compound nestled in what looked like pristine wilderness. Amelia could make out buildings arranged around a central courtyard, their architecture blending seamlessly with the forest that surrounded them. Security lights illuminated defensive positions that spoke of serious preparation for exactly this kind of situation. The helicopter touched down on a landing pad carved from native stone. As the rotors wound down, Amelia found herself surrounded by more of Gabriel's people. They moved with the same predatory grace she was beginning to associate with shifters, their eyes reflecting an inner light that marked them as something other than human. "Welcome to Wolfcrest," Gabriel said, extending his hand to help her from the aircraft. "This is the heart of my territory." Amelia accepted his assistance, though the contact sent that same electric shock up her arm. "Your territory? I'm what our kind calls an alpha," Gabriel explained as they walked toward the main building. "I lead the shifter community along the western coast. This compound serves as our headquarters and sanctuary." The interior of the main building was surprisingly warm and comfortable. Stone walls were softened by rich tapestries and carefully chosen artwork. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across leather furniture that looked both expensive and well-used. "You must be exhausted," Gabriel said, his formal tone at odds with the intimate setting. "Jackson will show you to your room. We can talk more in the morning when you've had time to process everything." A man stepped forward, tall, dark-haired, with the same predatory grace as the others, but warmer eyes. "I'm Jackson Stone," he said with a slight smile. "Gabriel's brother and second in command. Let me get you settled." Amelia followed Jackson through hallways lined with photographs showing the compound's history. She caught glimpses of Gabriel in many of them, sometimes in formal settings, with other serious-looking people, other times in candid shots with what were clearly pack members. In every image, he carried himself with the natural authority of someone born to lead. The guest room Jackson led her to was more luxurious than any hotel Amelia had ever seen. A king-size bed dominated the space, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the forest beyond. A fireplace had already been lit, casting warm light across polished wood floors covered with thick rugs. "The bathroom is through there," Jackson said, indicating a doorway. "You'll find clothes in the closet. We keep items in various sizes for situations like this. If you need anything else, just pick up the phone. The kitchen staff can prepare whatever you'd like to eat." "Situations like this?" Amelia asked. "Do you rescue people from shadowy government organizations often?" Jackson's smile was rueful. "More often than we'd like. The human world isn't as separate from ours as most people believe. There are always those who want to exploit the connection." "What do they want with me? I'm nobody special. You were seen with our alpha, Jackson said simply. That makes you special by association. He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. And there might be more to it than that. Gabriel will explain when he's ready. After Jackson left, Amelia stood alone in the luxurious room, trying to process the events of the last few hours. This morning, her biggest concern had been a midterm exam in comparative anatomy. Now she was a guest, or was it prisoner, in a supernatural stronghold, protected by creatures that shouldn't exist from enemies she didn't understand. She moved to the windows, looking out at the forest that stretched to the horizon. Somewhere in those trees she knew were patrols of shifter guards keeping watch for threats. The thought should have been comforting, but instead it emphasized how completely her world had changed. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Amelia turned to find a young woman entering with a tea service, her movements graceful and silent. "I'm Elise," she said with a warm smile. "I thought you might want something to help you sleep." "Thank you," Amelia said, accepting the steaming cup. The tea smelled of herbs she couldn't identify, but it carried an immediate sense of calm. "Can I ask you something?" Amelia ventured. "Of course." "Are you like them, a shifter?" Elise nodded. "Most of us here are. This compound houses about 200 pack members and their families. We're not just warriors. We're teachers, doctors, engineers, artists. We live full lives just hidden from the human world. Why hide if there are so many of you? Why not just reveal yourselves?" Elise's expression grew sad. "Because humans fear what they don't understand. History is full of what happens when they discover something different. We've learned that survival means secrecy." After Elise left, Amelia sipped the herbal tea and tried to make sense of her situation. She was safe but trapped, protected, but isolated from everything she'd known. And at the center of it all was Gabriel Stone, the enigmatic alpha who'd answered her desperate phone call and changed her life forever. Through her window, she could see lights moving through the forest. The patrols Jackson had mentioned. Her protectors were out there keeping watch through the night. But as sleep finally claimed her, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer Amelia Hayes, veterinary student and small-town nobody. She was something else now, though she didn't yet understand what. Morning sunlight streamed through Amelia's windows, and for a moment she lay still, hoping the events of the previous night had been nothing more than a vivid nightmare. But the luxurious bed and forest view beyond the glass confirmed that her world had indeed been turned upside down. A soft knock interrupted her disorientation. "Amelia, it's Elise. I've brought breakfast." The young shifter entered with a tray that smelled like heaven. Fresh coffee, warm pastries, and what looked like homemade jam. She set it on a small table by the windows. Her movements carrying that same fluid grace Amelia was beginning to associate with Gabriel's people. "How did you sleep?" Elise asked, pulling back the curtains to reveal a breathtaking view of the mountain valley. "Better than I expected," Amelia admitted, wrapping herself in the silk robe she'd found hanging in the bathroom. "Though I keep waiting to wake up and discover this was all a dream." Elise's smile was understanding. "The first contact with our world is always overwhelming. You're handling it remarkably well." "Am I? Because I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "Trust me, you're doing fine. I've seen humans discover our existence before, and most of them end up catatonic or hysterical. You fought back last night. That takes courage." Amelia sipped the coffee, which was better than anything she'd ever tasted, and studied Elise's face. The young woman couldn't be much older than herself, but her eyes held a wisdom that spoke of experiences far beyond her apparent years. "How long have you lived here?" Amelia asked. "All my life. I was born at Wolfcrest," Elise replied, settling into the chair across from her. "My parents were part of Gabriel's father's pack." "What happened to his father?" Elise's expression grew somber. "Murdered along with his mother. Gabriel was only 22 when he inherited the leadership of 12-pack territories. Most people thought he was too young, too inexperienced. He spent the last 7 years proving them wrong." Amelia felt a pang of unexpected sympathy. She understood what it meant to lose parents too young to have to navigate the world without the people who were supposed to guide you through it. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know what that's like. You lost your parents too." "When I was 16, car accident. Or at least, that's what I was told." Amelia set down her coffee cup, surprised by how easy it was to talk to Elise. "I was shuffled between foster homes until I aged out of the system. Not quite the same as inheriting supernatural leadership responsibilities." Elise finished gently. "But loss is loss. And Gabriel would understand that better than most. He's drawn to people who face tragedy and come out stronger. Before Amelia could ask what she meant by that, another knock sounded at the door. This time it was Jackson, his expression serious as he entered. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but Gabriel needs to see you. We've had some developments overnight." Amelia's stomach clenched with anxiety. "What kind of developments?" "The kind better discussed in private," Jackson replied, his tone diplomatic but firm. Amelia quickly dressed in the clothes that had been provided, jeans and a sweater that fit perfectly, though she tried not to think too hard about how they'd known her exact size. Jackson led her through the compound past training areas where shifters practice combat in both human and wolf forms. She couldn't help staring at the casual way they moved between shapes as if changing form was as natural as breathing. Some fought as humans with weapons she'd never seen before, while others prowled the practice ring as massive wolves, their movements coordinated with an intelligence that went far beyond animal instinct. "Impressive, isn't it?" Jackson said, noticing her fascination. "Most of us start training from childhood. By adulthood, the shift is as natural as walking." "How many of you are there, shifters, I mean?" "More than humans suspect." "Fewer than we'd like," Jackson replied carefully. "We're scattered across the globe in packs and territories. Gabriel's domain is one of the largest in North America." They entered a building that felt more like a corporate office than part of a supernatural stronghold. Glass-walled conference rooms lined a central corridor, while the air hummed with the quiet efficiency of important work being done. Through open doorways, Amelia caught glimpses of people working at computer terminals, their screens displaying information she couldn't interpret. Gabriel waited in a corner office that managed to be both professional and unmistakably his. The furniture was expensive but functional, while the walls displayed maps marked with symbols she didn't recognize. He stood with his back to them, staring out a window that offered a commanding view of the compound's defenses. "Thank you, Jackson," he said without turning around. "Close the door, please." Amelia found herself alone with the Alpha for the first time since their rescue. In daylight, Gabriel seemed even more imposing. Not just because of his physical presence, but because of the authority that radiated from him like heat from a flame. This was a man accustomed to making life or death decisions, to carrying the weight of hundreds of lives on his shoulders. "How are you feeling?" he asked, finally turning to face her. "Confused, overwhelmed, grateful," Amelia replied honestly. "Your people have been incredibly kind. They're good people. They deserve protection, which is why what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." Amelia's mouth went dry. "What happened?" Gabriel moved to his desk, picking up a tablet and scrolling through information that made his jaw tighten with anger. "The men who attacked us last night weren't random opportunists. They were part of an organization we've been tracking for months. Humans who capture and experiment on shifters." "Experiment how?" "They're trying to replicate our abilities, create artificial shifters they can control." Gabriel's voice was flat, but Amelia could hear the rage burning underneath. "They've been targeting isolated pack members, especially those with rare gifts." Amelia sank into one of the chairs facing his desk, her legs suddenly unsteady. "And they think I have rare gifts." "We think they know something about you that you don't know about yourself," Gabriel said gently. "Amelia, when you touched that injured German shepherd at the clinic, what did you feel?" "I felt connected to him, like I could sense his pain, understand what he needed." Amelia frowned, remembering. "But that's not unusual for me. I've always been good with animals." "Too good," Gabriel said. "The way you handled that dog's injury, the speed of his recovery, the fact that you were able to assist with medical procedures you'd never seen before. It all points to abilities that go beyond normal human capabilities." Amelia laughed shakily. "Are you saying I'm part shifter? Because I'm pretty sure I'd know if I could turn into a wolf." "Not all supernatural bloodlines manifest as shape-shifting," Gabriel explained, moving around the desk to sit in the chair beside her. "There are healers, empaths, seers, humans with dormant supernatural heritage who possess abilities their conscious minds don't recognize." "That's impossible. I know my family history. My parents were completely normal people." Gabriel's expression grew even more serious. "Amelia, we've been investigating your background since that night at the clinic. Your parents weren't killed in a car accident." The words hit her like a physical blow. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs as the world seemed to tilt around her. "What? They were murdered by the same organization that attacked us last night. Gabriel's voice was gentle but implacable. Your parents were part of a bloodline of healers, humans who could cure injuries and illnesses that would kill others. They refused to work with these people, so they were eliminated. Amelia stood abruptly, pacing to the window as her mind reeled. Everything she'd believed about her life, about her family, about herself, was crumbling like sand. "You're lying," she whispered. But even as she said it, pieces were falling into place. The way animals had always trusted her instinctively. The strange dreams she'd had as a child filled with images of light and healing. The foster families who'd called her too intense, who'd seemed almost afraid of her sometimes. "I wish I were," Gabriel said quietly. "But the evidence is overwhelming. And Amelia, there's more." She turned to face him, dreading what other revelations he might have. "More. The healing abilities you inherited aren't just rare, they're legendary. Your bloodline produces healers maybe once every 100 years. If these people capture you, they won't just study you. They'll use you to create an army of artificial shifters that could destroy everything we've built." Amelia sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was telling her. "I don't feel powerful. I don't feel special. I'm just me." "You're more than you know," Gabriel said, and something in his voice made her look up. His eyes were intense, searching her face as if looking for something specific. "Amelia, when we touched at the clinic, did you feel anything unusual?" Heat flooded her cheeks as she remembered the electric shock that had passed between them. "Yes, but I thought that was just attraction." "It was more than that." Gabriel leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "What you felt was the beginning of a soul bond." "A what?" "Among shifters, we have destined partners. When we meet them, there's an immediate recognition, a connection that goes beyond the physical or emotional." Gabriel's voice grew rough. "Amelia, you're not just a healer. You're my mate." The room went silent, except for the sound of Amelia's ragged breathing. Everything was too much, the revelations about her parents, about her abilities, about the connection she felt to this dangerous, compelling man. "I need air," she managed to say, standing on unsteady legs. "Amelia, wait." But she was already moving toward the door, desperate to escape the intensity of his gaze and the implications of everything he'd just told her. She fled through the corridors, past surprised pack members, toward the exit that would take her into the forest where she could think clearly. Behind her, she heard Gabriel calling her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not when her entire understanding of herself had just been destroyed and rebuilt in the span of a single conversation. The forest welcomed her with cool shadows and the rustle of wind through pine needles. Amelia ran deeper into the woods, following a path that seemed to call to her instincts. Only when she could no longer see the compound behind her did she finally stop, leaning against a massive tree trunk as she struggled to catch her breath. Her parents had been murdered. She had supernatural abilities. She was supposedly destined to be with a man she'd known for less than a week. And somewhere out there, people were hunting her for her blood. It was all too impossible, too overwhelming to process. And yet, deep down, something about Gabriel's revelations rang true. She'd always felt different, set apart from others by something she couldn't name. Now she had an explanation, however fantastic. Amelia didn't know how long she stood there, listening to the forest sounds and trying to make sense of her new reality. The sun had shifted position in the sky, shadows lengthening as afternoon turned toward evening. She should go back. Whatever the truth was, Gabriel's compound was safer than being alone in these woods. Just as she turned to retrace her steps, Amelia heard a twig snap behind her. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the trees, expecting to see Gabriel or one of his pack members come to find her. Instead, she saw a woman she didn't recognize, beautiful and dangerous with long dark hair and cold eyes. "Hello, little healer," the woman said, her voice carrying a purr that wasn't quite human. "You're a long way from safety." "Who are you?" Amelia asked, backing away slowly. "Someone who recognizes your value." The woman's smile revealed teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "My name is Cassandra, and I'm here to take you to someone who's been looking for you for a very long time." Amelia's back hit a tree. "You're one of Gabriel's people." Cassandra laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "I'm one of his pack, yes, but my loyalty lies elsewhere. Your alpha thinks he can protect everyone, but he's naive. There are forces at work here beyond his understanding. Gabriel will find me, Amelia said, trying to inject confidence into her voice. Oh, I'm counting on it. Cassandra smiled coldly. But by then it will be too late. Amelia saw the tranquilizer gun too late. The dart hit her shoulder and the world immediately began to blur. Her limbs felt heavy, her thoughts sluggish. As she slumped to the ground, she tried to call out for Gabriel, but her voice failed her. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Cassandra speaking into a radio, her words fading in and out of Amelia's consciousness. I have the healer. Yes. Tell Dr. Reed the package is secure. Amelia woke to the cold sensation of metal against her back. Her mind felt foggy, her limbs heavy, as she tried to orient herself. Harsh fluorescent lights burned overhead, causing her to squint as she took in her surroundings. She was lying on an examination table in what looked like a laboratory carved from raw stone. The walls were rough-hewn rock, but the equipment was state-of-the-art monitoring devices, surgical instruments and restraints that held her firmly to the table. Ah, you're awake. Excellent. The voice was cultured, refined, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Amelia turned her head to see a man in an expensive suit approaching her table. He was tall and lean, with perfectly styled blonde hair and cold blue eyes that studied her with scientific interest. Who are you? Amelia's voice came out as a croak, her throat dry from whatever drugs they'd given her. My name is Dr. Harrison Reed, he said, pulling up a chair beside her table. And you, my dear, are far more valuable than you realize. I don't know what you're talking about. Amelia tested the restraints holding her wrists and ankles, but they were designed to hold much stronger creatures than herself. Reed's smile was patronizing. Of course you don't. That's the beauty of dormant bloodlines. The power exists whether you're aware of it or not. Tell me, Amelia Hayes, do you know what your parents really were? Despite Gabriel's revelations earlier, hearing it from this stranger's lips sent ice through her veins. My parents were normal people. Normal people don't possess the genetic markers for supernatural healing abilities, Reed said, consulting a tablet in his hands. Normal people don't carry bloodlines that can trace their ancestry back to the original healers who walked alongside the first shifters centuries ago. He stood and moved to a nearby table covered with medical instruments. Amelia's heart rate spiked as she watched him examine various syringes and scalpels with casual interest. You see, my dear, your parents made a terrible mistake 16 years ago. When my organization approached them about joining our research program, they refused. They believed their gifts should remain hidden, used only to help animals and the occasional human who stumbled across their path. So you killed them, Amelia whispered, pieces of a horrific puzzle falling into place. We removed an obstacle, Reed corrected matter-of-factly, and we've been watching you ever since, waiting for your abilities to manifest. Imagine our surprise when our surveillance indicated you'd made contact with Gabriel Stone, the most powerful alpha on the western seaboard. Reed returned to his chair, leaning forward with predatory interest. That connection accelerated your awakening, didn't it? Being near such a powerful shifter, feeling the pull of the mate bond, it triggered abilities that might have remained dormant for years. Amelia said nothing, but her silence seemed to confirm his suspicions. The beauty of healer bloodlines, Reed continued, is that the abilities work regardless of the subject's cooperation. Your touch can cure injuries, accelerate healing, even bring someone back from the brink of death. All we need is your blood, your genetic material, and we can synthesize that power. To do what? Amelia demanded, though she dreaded the answer. To create controllable shifters, of course. Imagine an army of supernatural soldiers all bound to obey human commanders. No more hiding in the shadows. No more pretending to be the weaker species. Reed's eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. With your healing abilities incorporated into our serum, our artificial shifters will be nearly immortal. A door opened at the far end of the chamber, and several people in lab coats entered, wheeling equipment that looked like something from a Nightmare IV's extraction devices. Machines Amelia didn't recognize, but which radiated menace. The process will be somewhat uncomfortable, Reed said conversationally. But don't worry, we need you alive and relatively healthy for the foreseeable future. Think of yourself as a renewable resource. Amelia pulled against her restraints with desperate strength, but the metal held firm. Gabriel will find me. He'll tear this place apart. Oh, I'm counting on it, Reed replied with genuine pleasure. You see, dear Amelia, you're not just bait for one alpha. Cross isn't the only shifter who's shown interest in your unique abilities. By the time we're finished here, every major pack leader on the continent will be trying to rescue you. The implications hit Amelia like a sledgehammer. You want them to come. I want them to walk into the trap we've spent months preparing. Motion sensors, gas dispensers filled with concentrated tranquilizers, capture protocols designed specifically for supernatural physiology. Reed gestured to the stone walls around them. This facility has been designed as the ultimate shifter prison. Every alpha who comes for you will become another test subject. One of the lab technicians approached with a large syringe, its needle gleaming under the harsh lights. Amelia's healing abilities might have been dormant to her conscious mind, but her body recognized the threat instinctively. Power she'd never known she possessed suddenly blazed to life, flowing through her veins like liquid fire. The restraint holding her left wrist snapped. Reed's eyes widened with excitement rather than alarm. Magnificent. Did you see that the stress response triggered a massive surge in her cellular energy output? Amelia used her free hand to tear at the remaining restraints, but the technicians were already moving. More syringes appeared filled with sedatives designed to suppress supernatural abilities. But as the first needle pierced her skin, Amelia's power lashed out instinctively. The technician who'd injected her suddenly straightened his eyes, clearing, as if he'd awakened from a long sleep. Confusion replaced the cold professionalism on his face as he looked around the chamber. "What am I doing here?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine bewilderment. "Where are we?" Reed cursed and grabbed a weapon from one of the guards, shooting the confused technician with a tranquilizer dart. As the man collapsed, Reed turned to Amelia with renewed interest. "Fascinating. Your healing abilities can not only cure physical ailments, but also mental conditioning. That technician had been psychologically programmed for months, and you undid it with a single touch." Amelia had freed her other wrist and was working on the ankle restraints when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced security breaches in multiple sectors. "Right on schedule," Reed said, checking his watch. "Your mate has excellent timing." Through the facility's intercom system, Amelia could hear sounds of battle growls, gunfire, and the distinctive sound of metal being torn apart. Hope blazed in her chest as she recognized the fury in those wolf howls. Gabriel had found her, but Reed seemed unperturbed by the chaos. "Guards, initiate Protocol 7, he commanded. "It's time to welcome our guests properly." Gas began hissing from vents in the ceiling, not the killing kind, but Amelia could smell the chemical tang of the tranquilizers Reed had mentioned. Whatever concentration they were using was strong enough to affect shifters, which meant it would overwhelm her human physiology in seconds. Amelia freed her ankles and rolled off the examination table just as the chamber door exploded inward. Gabriel stood in the doorway in human form, his clothes torn and bloody, his eyes blazing with protective fury that made him look more wolf than man. "Get away from her," he snarled, his voice carrying a harmonics that spoke a barely controlled transformation. "I don't think so," Reed replied calmly, pressing a remote control in his hand. The floor beneath Gabriel's feet suddenly gave way, dropping him into a pit lined with silver spikes. Amelia screamed as she watched him fall, but Gabriel managed to catch the edge of the pit, his enhanced strength allowing him to hang suspended above the deadly trap. "Silver-lined capture pit," Reed explained conversationally. "Painful for shifters to touch, but not immediately fatal. We want him alive for the experiments after all." Amelia's power surged again, stronger this time, fueled by rage and desperation. She could feel Gabriel's pain through their nascent bond, could sense his strength failing as the silver burned his hands. Without thinking, she lunged toward Reed, her hands glowing with energy she was only beginning to understand. "Amelia, don't!" Gabriel's warning came too late. Reed caught her wrists in hands that felt like steel cables, his grip far stronger than any human should possess. As their skin made contact, Amelia realized with horror that her healing power was flowing into him, not harming him. "Thank you, my dear," Reed said as supernatural energy coursed through his body. "I was wondering how to field test our enhancement serum. Your power will make an excellent catalyst." Amelia watched in growing terror as Reed's eyes began to glow with stolen energy as his already impressive strength increased beyond human limitations. She'd just given their enemy the power to become something far worse than a mere human fanatic. She'd created a monster, but as Amelia's panic threatened to overwhelm her, she felt something else, a presence in her mind that wasn't her own. Gabriel's consciousness reached for hers through their nascent bond, offering strength, courage, and most importantly, knowledge. The bond, Gabriel's voice whispered in her mind, use it, Amelia. My strength is yours. Through their connection, Gabriel showed her how to reverse the flow of energy, how to take back what was hers, and more besides. As Reed's enhanced strength lifted her off the ground, Amelia focused on the bond drawing power, not just from herself, but from Gabriel as well. The mate bond he'd spoken of wasn't just an emotional connection. It was a conduit that allowed them to share abilities to become more than the sum of their parts. Impossible, Reed snarled as he felt the change in her energy signature. You're just a human with dormant abilities. No, Amelia said, her voice stronger than it had been moments before. I'm something else entirely. Behind her, another figure appeared in the doorway, an elderly man with silver hair and ancient eyes that burned with inner fire. He moved with surprising speed for someone his age, crossing the room in seconds to reach Gabriel, helping him pull himself up from the silver pit. Despite the obvious pain, it caused the older man to touch the toxic metal. Victor, Gabriel gasped, recognizing his rescuer. How did you— No time, the older man said, his voice crisp with authority. The girl needs us. As Victor helped Gabriel to safety, Amelia felt a new surge of power flowing through their connection. Whatever this elderly man was, his presence strengthened both of them, creating a triangle of energy that amplified Amelia's nascent abilities beyond anything she could have managed alone. The power building within her wasn't just healing energy anymore. It carried the force of Gabriel's alpha authority and something ancient and profound from Victor, the protective fury of a mate defending his chosen partner, and the wisdom of centuries of shifter knowledge. Amelia had never felt anything like the strength flowing through her veins, transforming her from victim to something far more dangerous. Reed's face contorted with shock as he felt the energy flow reverse. What is this? He snarled, his enhanced strength no match for the combined power now flowing through Amelia. This, Victor said from across the room, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, is what happens when you face a true mate bond. Amelia channeled the combined power flowing through her into a surge of pure healing energy. But instead of letting Reed steal it, she reversed the flow. Every enhanced ability he'd absorbed, every artificial modification his body had undergone, she began systematically dismantling. Reed screamed as his stolen strength turned against him. The enhancements that had made him superhuman became weaknesses as Amelia's power identified them as foreign elements to be purged. His grip on her wrists loosened as his body convulsed with the effort of containing energies at war within his cells. Kill them all, Reed managed to shout to his remaining guards. But Gabriel was already moving, his injuries forgotten in the face of mortal threat to his mate. He shifted mid-leap human form, dissolving into the massive black wolf that had first saved Amelia in the parking lot. His jaws closed around the throat of the nearest guard, while his claws tore across tactical armor designed to stop bullets, but not supernatural fury. Amelia felt every moment of the battle through their growing connection. Gabriel's pain became hers, but so did his strength, his speed, his predatory instincts honed by years of leadership. She'd never fought anyone in her life, but now she moved with borrowed knowledge, ducking attacks and striking back with precision that surprised her enemies. Victor joined the fray, and Amelia was astonished to see the elderly man transform into a silver-gray wolf, smaller than Gabriel, but moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had survived countless battles. Where Gabriel fought with raw power, Victor used precision and cunning targeting, weak points, and disabling opponents with minimal effort. This is impossible, Reed gasped, struggling to maintain control as Amelia's power continued dismantling his enhancements. Mate bonds don't activate this quickly. The process takes time, preparation, ritual. You're wrong, Amelia said, dodging a tranquilizer dart and redirecting its trajectory into one of Reed's own men. Some connections transcend your understanding of how things work. Through the facility's sound system, she could hear the battle expanding. Gabriel's pack had arrived in force, dismantling Reed's carefully prepared trap with coordinated efficiency. The gas designed to incapacitate shifters was being neutralized by pack members with specialized abilities, while the silver-lined capture pits were being bypassed by wolves who'd spent years training for exactly this kind of rescue operation. But Reed wasn't finished. Even as Amelia's power stripped away his stolen abilities, he pulled a final weapon from his jacket, a syringe filled with liquid that glowed with unnatural light. If I can't control you, he snarled, then I'll make sure no one can benefit from your abilities. The needle was aimed at Amelia's heart, designed to deliver a toxin that would corrupt her healing gifts into their opposite, a power that would cause death instead of life. But Gabriel's wolf form intercepted the strike, Reed's syringe piercing fur and muscle, instead of finding its intended target. Amelia felt the poison enter Gabriel's bloodstream through their bond, felt his system beginning to shut down when as the toxin attacked his enhanced physiology. But she also felt something else, an opportunity. The mate bond worked both ways. If she could share his strength, then she could also share his burden. Amelia placed her hands on Gabriel's wolf form, channeling not just healing energy, but her very life force into him. The toxin that would have killed him in minutes became something she could fight. Her power adapted specifically to purge foreign substances from living systems. But the effort required everything she had. Amelia felt her own strength draining away as she pulled Reed's poison into herself, using her body as a filter to cleanse what threatened her mate. The chamber around them began to blur as consciousness started slipping away. No, Gabriel's voice in her mind was fierce with denial. Amelia, stop. You'll kill yourself. Better me than you, she managed to think back, though forming coherent thoughts was becoming increasingly difficult. Not acceptable. Gabriel's human form materialized as he shifted back, his hands covering hers where they pressed against his chest. We do this together or not at all. Their combined will focused the poison into a concentrated mass that Amelia's power could isolate and destroy. Instead of trying to process the toxin alone, they shared the burden between them, the mate bond, allowing them to divide what would have been fatal to either one separately. Victor, Gabriel called out to the older shifter who had returned to human form. We need you. The elderly man knelt beside them, placing his weathered hands over theirs. The old way, then, he said, his voice carrying a trace of satisfaction. I didn't think I'd live to see a triad healing. Through their joined touch, Amelia felt Victor's essence joining theirs, ancient, powerful, and filled with a depth of knowledge that took her breath away. Unlike Gabriel's raw strength, Victor's contribution was precision and control, guiding the healing energies with the expertise of someone who had done this many times before. Reed watched in growing horror as his ultimate weapon was systematically neutralized. This isn't how it works, he protested. Mate bonds are emotional connections, not shared power sources. Shows how much you really know about shifters. Jackson's voice came from the chamber entrance as Gabriel's brother arrived with reinforcements. True mate bonds are the rarest and strongest connections in our world. They create partnerships that transcend individual limitations. The remaining guards surrendered as pack members filled the chamber, their coordinated assault having overwhelmed Reed's facility completely. But Amelia barely noticed their arrival. Her attention focused entirely on the man whose life she'd just saved and who had saved hers in return. The bond is complete, Gabriel said softly, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Amelia, do you understand what that means? She nodded, feeling the connection between them as clearly as her own heartbeat. It means we're partners in everything. It means you're Luna of the Western Territories, Jackson said with a grin. Alpha female to every shifter pact from here to the Pacific Ocean. Hope you're ready for some responsibility. Amelia looked around the chamber at the defeated facility, at the pack members who watched her with respect and expectation, at Gabriel, whose life was now intertwined with hers in ways she was only beginning to understand. 24 hours ago, she'd been a veterinary student worried about exam grades. Now she was something she'd never imagined possible, the mate of the most powerful alpha on the continent, with abilities that could heal or destroy, depending on how she chose to use them. I'm ready, she said, surprised by how true the words felt. Reed laughed bitterly from where he lay, restrained by Jackson's men. You have no idea what you've just committed yourself to. The human world won't tolerate your existence once they learn what you really are. They'll hunt you, study you, try to replicate what makes you special. Let them try, Amelia said, her voice carrying an authority she'd never possessed before. They'll find that some things can't be stolen or copied. She looked at Gabriel, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The frightened woman who'd hidden in the clinic less than a week ago was gone, replaced by someone who understood her place in a larger world. The mate bond hummed between them, strong and unbreakable, promising a future neither could have imagined alone. Victor approached them as the pack secured the facility, his silver hair gleaming under the harsh lights. Up close, Amelia could see the weight of years in his face lines carved by time and experienced eyes that had witnessed centuries of shifter history. "You did well today, young healer," he said, his voice carrying a formal quality. "It has been many generations since we've seen one with your natural gifts." "How did you know to come here?" Gabriel asked, one arm still protectively around Amelia's waist. "I've been tracking Reed's organization for decades," Victor replied. "Long before you were born, Gabriel. I knew your father and his father before him. When I heard rumors of a healer manifesting in the Western Territories, I knew I needed to see for myself." Amelia studied the older shifter with newfound curiosity. "You're not part of Gabriel's pack, are you?" "I am bound to no pack," Victor said. "I am what the old ones called a sentinel, a keeper of shifter knowledge, a guardian of the ancient ways. I move between territories serving where I'm needed most." He turned to Gabriel. "Your father would be proud of the alpha you've become." Gabriel's expression softened at the mention of his father. "You knew him well." "I helped train him, just as I trained many alphas before him," Victor said. "And now it seems I have arrived in time to help train his son's mate." "Train me?" Amelia asked. "Your abilities are extraordinary but raw," Victor explained. "Without proper guidance, they could overwhelm you. What you did today, sharing the burden of the poison, was instinctive but dangerous. There are techniques, disciplines that will help you channel your gift without risking yourself." Gabriel looked at Victor with newfound respect. "We would be honored by your guidance." The older shifter nodded. "Then let us leave this place. These walls have seen enough pain." As they prepared to depart, Amelia paused beside Reed, who watched her with a mixture of hatred and fascination. "What will happen to him?" she asked Gabriel. "Justice," Gabriel said simply. "He'll face a tribunal of alphas from all territories. His crimes aren't just against us, but against shifter kind everywhere." Reed's eyes never left Amelia's face. "This isn't over," he said softly. "There are others who will continue my work, others who understand what's at stake." "Then they'll face the same fate you do," Amelia replied, feeling no satisfaction, only resolution. They emerged from the underground facility to find the forest bathed in moonlight. Pack members moved efficiently around them, securing prisoners and treating the wounded. The night air felt clean after the sterile environment of Reed's laboratory, and Amelia drew it deep into her lungs, savoring the sense of freedom. Gabriel stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Everything has changed so fast. My whole life turned upside down in less than a week." "Change isn't always easy," Victor said, joining them, "but sometimes it reveals who we truly are." Amelia looked up at the night sky, at the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. "And who am I truly, Creed?" That, Gabriel said, taking her hand, is something we'll discover together. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at Reed's facility, and Amelia was still adjusting to the reality of her transformed life. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office at Wolfcrest, watching pack members go about their evening routines in the compound below. Children played in the courtyard while their parents finished work shifts, and patrol teams prepared for their nightly circuits through the forest. The scene was peaceful, domestic, so at odds with the danger they had faced half a year ago. "Second thoughts," Gabriel's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and understanding. Amelia turned to find her mate leaning against the doorframe, still wearing the formal suit he'd donned for their video conference with the European pack leaders earlier that day. Even after months of being bonded, the sight of him still made her pulse quicken. "Never," she said, moving into his arms with the easy familiarity of established intimacy. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now." "Different how?" Gabriel asked, his hands settling at her waist as he pulled her closer. "6 months ago, the most important decision I had to make was which textbook to study from." Amelia laughed, gesturing toward the papers spread across her desk. "Now I'm reviewing territorial agreements and healing protocols for 12 different pack communities." The transition from veterinary student to Luna had been challenging, but deeply fulfilling. Amelia's unique abilities as a healer had revolutionized medical care throughout Gabriel's territory, allowing her to establish treatment centers that served both shifters and the human communities that unknowingly bordered their lands. "Any regrets?" Gabriel asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Only that it took a life-or-death situation for us to find each other, Amelia replied, reaching up to straighten his tie. Though I suppose that's fitting for us. Their relationship had deepened steadily since completing the mate bond, but it had required adjustment from both sides. Gabriel had learned to share the isolation of leadership, while Amelia had grown into authority she'd never expected to wield. The young woman who'd once worried about paying rent was now responsible for the welfare of thousands. A knock at the office door interrupted their moment. Elise entered carrying a tablet and wearing the expression that meant important news. "Sorry to interrupt," she said with a grin that suggested she wasn't particularly sorry. "But Dr. Morgan is here for your monthly evaluation, Amelia. And Jackson wants to brief you both on the new territorial applications from the Midwest PACs." Amelia sighed, stepping back from Gabriel's embrace. The glamorous life of supernatural leadership. "Dr. Morgan first," Gabriel decided. "The territorial discussions can wait until after we know how you're progressing." Dr. Morgan was the PAC's senior medical officer, a woman whose shifting abilities had manifested in enhanced diagnostic senses rather than the typical wolf form. She'd been monitoring Amelia's development as a healer, documenting abilities that continued to evolve at an unprecedented rate. "How are you feeling?" De Morgan asked as she set up her monitoring equipment in the medical bay adjacent to Amelia's office. "Strong, better than I ever have, actually," Amelia replied honestly. "The connection with Gabriel has stabilized everything. My abilities don't feel wild or unpredictable anymore." "That's consistent with what we're seeing in the data," De Morgan confirmed, reviewing readings that tracked Amelia's energy output and healing capacity. "Your power levels have increased by nearly 30% since the bonding ceremony, but more importantly, your control has improved dramatically." The formal claiming ceremony had taken place 3 weeks after the rescue, a private ritual, witnessed only by PAC leadership and Amelia's chosen family within the community. Unlike human weddings, shifter bonding ceremonies focused on the spiritual and psychic connection between mates, creating legal and mystical ties that bound them in ways human marriage couldn't match. "Any unusual symptoms?" Dr. Morgan continued her examination, taking blood samples that would reveal more than any human medical test could detect. "Actually, yes," Amelia said, glancing at Gabriel. "I've been having vivid dreams lately, not nightmares, but incredibly detailed visions of places I've never been, people I've never met. And sometimes I wake up knowing things I shouldn't know." De Morgan paused in her work, exchanging a meaningful look with Gabriel. "What kind of knowledge?" "Yesterday, I knew that a PAC member in Oregon was injured before Jackson received the emergency call," Amelia explained. "Last week, I woke up with detailed information about healing techniques that aren't in any textbook I've studied." "Ancestral memory," Dr. Morgan said with excitement. "Your healer bloodline is connecting you to the knowledge of previous generations. It's incredibly rare, even among documented healers." "Is it dangerous?" Gabriel asked, his protective instincts immediately activated. "Not dangerous, but significant," Dr. Morgan replied. "Amelia, you're developing into something beyond what we initially expected. The combination of your natural abilities, the mate bond enhancement, and now ancestral memory access makes you possibly the most powerful healer born in centuries." The implications hung heavy in the air. Power of that magnitude brought responsibility and risk in equal measure. "There's something else," Amelia said quietly. "I think I might be pregnant." The words hung in the sudden silence like a dropped bomb. Gabriel went very still beside her, his expression cycling through surprise, joy, and protective concern. "How long have you suspected?" Dr. Morgan asked, her professional demeanor masking obvious excitement. "A few weeks. The symptoms are subtle, but combined with the enhanced abilities and the strange dreams." Amelia shrugged. "It feels different than anything I've experienced before." Dr. Morgan immediately began additional tests, her equipment humming with activity as it analyzed samples that would confirm or deny Amelia's suspicions. The wait felt eternal, filled with the weight of possibilities that would change everything once again. "Congratulations," Dr. Morgan finally said with a broad smile. "You're definitely pregnant, about 8 weeks along, based on the hormone levels and energy signatures I'm detecting." Amelia felt Gabriel's arms wrap around her, from behind his joy and wonder flooding through their own with overwhelming intensity. A child. Their child. The first offspring of a true healer and an alpha in documented shifter history. What does this mean? Amelia asked, though she suspected the answer would be complicated. It means your child will be unique, Dr. Morgan replied carefully. The offspring of such powerful bloodlines has never been recorded. We're in uncharted territory. But the baby will be healthy, Gabriel asked, his voice tight with concern. As far as I can determine, perfectly healthy, Dr. Morgan assured them. But Amelia, your abilities will likely continue evolving throughout the pregnancy. We'll need to monitor you closely. Later that evening, Amelia and Gabriel walked through the forest surrounding Wolfcrest, following paths they'd traveled countless times during their bonding period. The woods felt different now, not just familiar, but truly home. Are you scared? Amelia asked, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Terrified, Gabriel admitted with characteristic honesty. I've led packs through wars and territorial disputes, but the thought of being responsible for a child who might inherit both our abilities. He shook his head. That's a level of responsibility I never imagined. We'll figure it out together, Amelia said, echoing words he'd spoken to her during their first weeks at the compound. That's what mates do. They paused at their favorite overlook where the valley spread out below them, dotted with the lights of the compound. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled their evening songs to the rising moon. Do you ever miss your old life? Gabriel asked. Amelia considered the question seriously. I miss the simplicity sometimes, but that woman who worried about exam grades and rent payments was living half a life. She didn't know what she was capable of, didn't understand her place in the world. And now you do. Now I know that some people are meant for extraordinary things, Amelia replied, turning to face him. I was terrified that night in the clinic when you walked through the door, but part of me recognized you even then. Recognized home. Gabriel kissed her with the passion and tenderness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. A perfect blend of gentle devotion and fierce protection. Through their bond, Amelia felt his absolute commitment to their future. His determination to build a world where their child could grow up safe and strong. I love you, he said against her lips, words that carried the weight of eternity. I love you too, Amelia replied, her hand finding the business card she still carried in her pocket. A reminder of the wrong number that had led to everything right in her life. Above them, the full moon cast silver light across the forest, illuminating the path that had brought them together and would carry them into whatever challenges awaited. They were no longer just individual people trying to survive in a complex world. They were mates, partners, leaders of a community that looked to them for protection and guidance. And soon they would be parents to a child who would inherit abilities that could reshape the relationship between human and shifter worlds. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bound by love and destiny in equal measure. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility and anchored by the unbreakable connection forged in crisis and strengthened by choice. Amelia Hayes, the frightened veterinary student, was gone forever. In her place stood Amelia Stone, Luna healer, and mother-to-be, ready for whatever extraordinary adventures lay ahead. But in a different laboratory miles from Wolfcrest, a young scientist examined a vial of blood under a powerful microscope. A sample taken from Harrison Reed before his capture, still showing traces of the modifications, and more importantly, of the healing energy that had flowed through him. Beside the microscope lay Dr. Maxwell's journal recovered from the veterinary clinic where Amelia had once worked. Its pages contained decades of observations about the young woman with extraordinary gifts that the old veterinarian had protected since she was a child. The scientist made careful notes, knowing that what had happened was only the beginning. Reed might have failed, but his vision lived on. The war between humans and shifters was far from over. It had only just begun.